Oh yeah, another day, another camera release. Got to love the camera wars. This is the new Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. I remember when the ZV-E10 first came out. I had it pre-release. I did a whole bunch of videos on it, and there was so many people in the comments section like nobody wants another vlog camera. And look, here we are to this day, almost 3 years later after the ZV-E10 was announced, and it is still by far the most popular camera out there. Now, to be honest, when I initially reviewed it, I thought it was a dope little camera. However, it had a lot of shortcomings. For example, they used an old sensor. It only shot in 8-bit. The frame rates were super limited, and on top of that, it had that super tiny battery, which I absolutely couldn't stand. And what they did is basically took all the sauce from the new cameras like the 6700, the ZV-E1, and the Sony FX30, mashed it up, priced it at $999. So it is a little bit more pricey, but let's go. All right, I want y'all to try to guess which camera is which. Which one is the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II and which is the Sony ZV-E1? Take a second, drop it down in the comments. Left side or right side? Which side is the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II? Okay, most of y'all probably guessed right. This is the ZV-E10 Mark II. I brought the ZV-E1 because I wanted to show you how similar they are, if not almost the freaking same, okay? The ZV-E1 is bigger because it's got a full frame in there, okay? The ZV-E10 Mark II is a tiny bit shorter. If I turn them on the side, you can see the difference right here, okay? So that's basically where we are. It is a tiny freaking camera, and before I go into all the details, just look around. Look how similar these two freaking cameras are. Basically, they took the Sony ZV-E1 and shrunk it down a little bit. So here's our ZV-E10 Mark II. It's the same 26 megapixel sensor that's in the Sony a6700 and FX30, which means the camera is so much better when it comes to imaging. We'll talk about that stuff in 1 second. On the side, we literally have the same I/O as we have with the Sony ZV-E1. Single card slot right down here. You have a micro HDMI and a headphone jack. And up here, you have USB-C for webcam streaming and a microphone input. On the right hand side, you got nothing. On the bottom, I specifically left this compartment empty because I want you to see how big the battery compartment is. This is one of my biggest gripes with the Sony ZV-E10 is it had the smaller Sony battery in it. That is no freaking more. If we look at the top, this is just like the Sony ZV-E1. So we have the smart MI shoe right there, which means you can connect all of Sony's digital microphones, which is dope. You have the same 3 cardioid pattern vlog mic, just like the ZV-E1 has, which is amazing. You have photo, video SQ switch, a zoom rocker for power zoom lenses and clear image zoom, and the rest of your buttons on the back. You got buttons also, and your flippy screen right over here. So very, very similar to the ZV-E1, if not a direct copycat. I got one more thing to show you. Now this right here is Sony's new 16-50 kit lens. It's a power zoom lens. It's got optical steady shot built into it. It's very, very similar looking to the other one, but the main difference now is this improved autofocus, and it doesn't lose focus when zooming in and out like the original 16-50 did. So now this can keep up with all of Sony's new offerings. But tiny camera, as you can see, tiny freaking camera. I know I mentioned briefly the new sensor inside the ZV-E10 Mark II, but I want to take an extra second and talk about it because it's a freaking huge deal. The original ZV-E10 had a 24 megapixel sensor that could only film in 8-bit up to 4K 30. It had terrible roll and shutter performance as well as everything else. It was just an old sensor, right? Well, now everything has changed in the ZV-E10 Mark II because, as I've already stated 40,000 times, it's got the new sensor out the 6700 and out the FX30. This new sensor is way, way better. First of all, it's a whole lot faster, so you don't have to worry about rolling shutter everywhere. And now you can actually film in 10-bit up to 422 intra and long GOP options, and it can film up to 4K 60 or 1080p 120, all with autofocus and S-Log3 and all that other good stuff that you already know from Sony cameras. Also, because it's 26 megapixels, you get more data for stills, you get more dynamic range. There are no uncompressed RAW options, only compressed and lossless compressed, so that's something that y'all need to know. You got your typical suite of JPEG and HEIF options and all that other good stuff, but overall, the imaging suite on the ZV-E10 Mark II has been hugely upgraded over the ZV-E10, and now this is on par with all of Sony's new cameras and honestly all the competition now. Alright, let's talk about microphones and stabilization, okay? So right now you are listening to the built-in mics, the ZV-E10 Mark II. I left the wind noise reduction on auto because it's a windy day, and I do have the little dead cat that's included with the ZV-E10 Mark II on top of it. Now, just like the ZV-E1, the camera is intelligent enough to know that if it's focused on somebody in front of the camera, it should automatically switch the directionality to the front, and if they leave out the frame, it'll switch it back to capture audio from all around the camera. It works pretty dope. Does it replace a real microphone? No. But in the pinch, when you don't have a microphone, these microphones actually sound pretty decent. And of course, you can use the ECM mics if you want to, because there is an MI issue. Now, when you talk about stabilization, the ZV-E10 Mark II, just like the Mark I, does not have any physical stabilization, okay? It's all digital. So right now, I'm actually using the Kit 16-50, which does have OSS built into it, which is also why the freaking shutter is cranked to all oblivion, because I don't have an ND filter for this lens, and it's allowing me to do standard stabilization, which means it's only using the stabilization from the lens. Now, let's say you put a lens on here that doesn't have OSS. Well, the only option that the ZV-E10 Mark II gives you is active, which is digital only. So I'm gonna flip this over to active so you can see what it looks like on a lens that does have physical stabilization, because it's gonna use them together. Then I'm gonna switch to a lens that doesn't have OSS so you can see what active alone looks like, okay? So let me switch to active with this lens. Okay, now this is active with a lens that has OSS on it. So physical plus digital stabilization, but as you see, there's a pretty significant crop, and I'm holding it at the same length, same distance, so it does get pretty tight. Now I'm gonna switch over to the 16 to 35 millimeter f4G, which does not have OSS, which means we can only rely on the active stabilization out the camera, no physical stabilization whatsoever. Let's see how that fares. All right, so we are back with the Sony 16 to 35 millimeter f4 PZG, which is a full frame lens, so of course it's not as wide as we would like. My arm is fully extended, internal mics, active stabilization only, okay? So you'll definitely want to get wider lenses on APS-C, but this is what it will look like using a lens that doesn't have OSS on it, okay? You'll be using digital stabilization only. Let me know in the comment section if the ZV-E10 Mark II passes the stabilization test for you. Now we need to go talk about freaking autofocus. Hey yo, before we talk about autofocus with the new ZV-E10 Mark II, you know what I've been noticing? A lot of y'all been coming back watching my videos, but you ain't subscribed. Like, come on, what type of crap is that? Can we go ahead and fix that? Thank you. Now, I hope y'all can hear me all right. It's mad windy out here, and I'm glad it's cooling off, because we've been in a freaking oven for 2 weeks. It looked like it's about to storm, but let's go ahead and talk about the autofocus, because this is important. All right, let's go ahead and get this out the way. This camera does not have the AI chip that Sony's other newer cameras have. So that just means that it can't do, you know, AI stuff. It can't do stuff like human pose estimation. It can't track as many subjects. So the other cameras can do like planes, trains, insects, automobiles, all that other good stuff, whereas this camera can only do people, animals, and there's a setting for birds. That also means that you don't get things like framing stabilizer or auto framing, and there's more stuff that you don't get also. However, that doesn't mean that this camera is a slouch or slow by any means. It's still got a Bionz XR chip in there, so it's mad fast, and the autofocus is still mad fast and mad accurate, just like every other camera that Sony makes. The only time you would notice a difference would be if you were directly comparing it to one of the cameras that have the AI chip in there. Obviously, then there's a difference, but even without the AI chip, this is still one of the best autofocusing cameras out there. If that is something that's important to you, I understand the AI chip is not there for $999. However, I don't think autofocus should be a concern of yours with this camera, because it's still fire. I want to take a second and show y'all the changes to the menu and UI design, because if you have an original ZV-E10, you probably know how ancient that camera is. Now, if you've used the 6700 or the new ZV-1 Mark II or the Sony ZV-E1, then you probably noticed some of these changes, but if you haven't, I want to show them to you anyway. So on the screen on the left and right side, you see now you have tabs that you can quickly access most of your functions. So the way Sony is doing the screen is so you don't have to dig through the menu a whole lot. And you got a bunch of options on the side. You can swipe those away if you want to. If we look at the bottom, now we have the option to touch these and change the parameters. Oops, let me change it, like white balance, ISO, shutter speed, all that other good stuff. So that is a very welcome change. And down in the lower left-hand corner, you see we actually have access to a 48th of a second shutter speed and also a 96th of a second shutter speed. Sony, we need this on all cameras. Now up top, you see just like all of Sony's newer cameras, you have the information bar that gives you your frame rate, resolutions, all that other good stuff. So very, very welcome changes. You can also obviously swipe up from the bottom to access the function menu. Now I want to show you the new updated menu. So just like all of Sony's newer cameras, this is now in tiled format, so much easier to use and operate. A lot of these options, if you press the trash can icon, will give you a description now, which is a lot better than what it used to be. And the biggest thing I want to show you is if I turn the camera in the vertical, the UI rotates with it. This is something that we need on every freaking Sony camera, the option to have this automatically rotate when you rotate the camera. You can obviously disable that if you want to, but that is such a welcome freaking change. Now, of course, because this is one of Sony's vlog cameras, it's got all of Sony's vlog fittings on here. You know, the usual suspects, like there's a background defocus mode right here. We just press that button and it blurs everything out into freaking oblivion. You got product showcase mode. You got soft scan effects. You got your Cinevlog option, which puts on the, you know, cinematic black bars and switches it over to S-Cinetone for you. Then you got stuff like being able to upload 4 LUTs to the camera so that you can use it for video. All of your creative looks in there. There's the air conditioner are in there too, so you can go in there and customize them and save presets. And it's got stuff like USB streaming, so you can use the camera as a USB webcam up to 4K 30. There's a network streaming option in here now, and your time-lapse options are in there still, where all you got to do is create it in the camera and it spits out a created time-lapse for you. You don't have to go and post and, you know, stitch all the freaking images together and all that other good stuff. You got your triple cardioid pattern vlog mic in there that I keep telling y'all about. Overall, like all of Sony's other vlog cameras, it's got all of the sauce for creators to make life easier for you, okay? Yo, I had to stop by Panda Express to get some of my favorite chicken egg rolls, and it's a dude playing the freaking bagpipe over here. The music sounds actually pretty fire. Anyways, what do y'all think about the new ZV-E10 Mark II? I think it's a fantastic little camera. I feel like I say that about every camera now, but it ain't really no bad cameras. And I don't think they'll be able to keep them on the shelf, just like they can't keep the ZV-E10, the original one, on the shelf. But I'm curious to know what y'all think down in the comment section. I'm sure if I recommend it, y'all could be like, oh, Terry, you a shill, and y'all know how y'all get down. Anyways, for real, let me know what you think about this camera down in the comment section. If you want to watch my video on the ZV-E1 versus the Lumix S9, which is another super hot topic, I will leave that in the end card, and I'm curious to know what y'all think. So until next time, I'm out of here. Tyson Terry Warfield. Piece of chick grease. I'm out, y'all. Much love. Peace.